We'd like to warn you that there's some graphic content ahead, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Hi, I'm Scott Margolin, and welcome to Season 4 of Arc Week, Humanizing the Hazard. We've all heard the statistics dozens or hundreds of times. About 1 arc flash fatality per week in the United States. 5 to 10 serious or catastrophic injuries as a result of arc flash in the United States. But do we ever really stop, take a moment, and consider the people behind the statistics? That's what we're going to do this season. You're going to see a lot less of me and a lot more of 3 arc flash survivors telling their stories firsthand.
Whenever you have a big burn, they don't give you a survival rate, they give you a death rate, which is your age added to what percent of burn you have. I had a 68% death rate. I was 27 years old and my percentage of burn was 41%. They said I was 5 minutes away from losing my life. What I found out after the accident is the company that I was working for didn't even have the proper arc flash suit for what I was working in at the time. My name's Brandon Smith, and I've been an electrician for 12 years, and I'm an arc flash survivor. The job that day that I was tasked with was going from a old transformer in like 30-something-year-old building to a new transformer they just put in. I was inside of a 200 amp disconnect on a vertical bus duct. And I really didn't know the project because I was over a different project. And I was just there for one day helping them out. I knew it was energized work, but the foreman told me it was a rush job. We had to get it done that day, 10 minutes before we leave on a Friday. And I was just trying to do my best. I was aware that the PPE was required, but I honestly didn't know the PPE. I never had ARC training. I never had the proper safety training, but I did know when you do energized work as an apprentice, if you're working in it, you have to have the gear and you have to have a competent electrician with you. We already ran the pipe, we ran the wire in there, everything. Foreman came up, pulled the fuses out, packed up his gear and left, which I should have known. Don't do it, make him come back up with his own gear and do the job. He should have known better than to just pull his gloves out, pull fuses and leave. I was in a mindset to where I was an apprentice electrician, where I'm trying to prove myself. Foreman asked me to do something, I do it, and it all went downhill. I was in the gear and I was about to do the hookup, and my best friend of 20 years was behind me. Well, I turned around to say something to him, and then next thing I know, there's a flash. My hearing just went deaf for 10 seconds. It shook the windows in the building across the street, and I didn't know about it. I was wearing a 100% cotton regular company shirt. So I stumble out and I'm on fire. My first instinct was stop, drop, and roll. I face planted the concrete, bad decision. Stop, drop, and roll doesn't work on concrete. And then he ended up kicking me a little bit, trying to get it out, didn't work. And then he ended up ripping my shirt off. I held his shoulder as we walked down 7 flights of stairs. Luckily, there was a fire truck out front, and if that fire truck wasn't there, I wouldn't be here today. I was actually fully awake the entire time. I was sitting on the curb. The inspector on the job site, he was taking pictures of me sitting on the curb and yelling at me because I was apparently picking my skin off, which I thought it was my t-shirt. I walked on the ambulance myself. Those medics were terrified half to death to touch me. I said, you better knock me out before this adrenaline's gone because I don't want to feel anything. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 days. The worst part for me was I was injured on July 25th. My daughter was born on August 19th. I was released from the hospital on September 10th. So my daughter's never seen me without the burns. I spent all that time in the hospital, and it still took me 2 years to go through over 20 surgeries and fully heal. My son was 1 year old at the time, wasn't allowed to interact with me for the first 8 months after my accident because they were afraid he was gonna hurt me. And when I was in the hospital, I kept positive attitude because why would I be all upset and depressed about my situation when if I do that, I might stay in that situation. I might have been disabled the rest of my life. All I could do was keep a positive attitude and push through it. I deal with everything through humor, and a lot of my friends do too. I used to drink a lot of Fireball. That was just my drink. So my buddy had me in his phone as Fireball Smith and didn't think anything of it. He goes to visit me in the hospital and he's looking at me, looking at his phone, looking at me, and he goes, well, this has a double meaning now. My biggest thing is with getting through it, I always rationalize and I know what happened. I know what was my fault. I know what was their fault in the whole thing. And that's how I kept a good attitude. I don't know all the full medical cost of it, but when I returned to work, the HR lady at the company told me that at that point, the medical bills was $4.3 million. I was on 25 medications. I was in surgeries at least once a week, if not every other day. I had 5 surgeons that were on top of my case on different segments of my grafts. My life is different now. This has fully changed my perspective on safety and helping people not go through what I went through. There's a million dominoes that could have fell over a different way and prevented this. If I didn't get so into proving myself and would have had the sense to say no like I knew I should have done, it wouldn't have happened. If I would have told that foreman, you better pull him out because you're the one with the arc flash gear, it wouldn't happen. My life is different now. I get more fatigued easily because of my grafts, because I have to work harder to stretch. It's harder to mess with my kids because if I go play with my kids, I risk hurting myself. And they want to climb on me and everything. They don't understand if they mess with my right shoulder, they might hurt me. And I let them mess with me because I'm not going to tell them no. My advice to other electricians is always think ahead. Think through your process, make sure you have the proper gear for what you're working with. If you don't know the proper gear, you ask somebody. If they tell you just do it, don't do it. Make sure you've got what you need to get into there safely and out. If you don't feel comfortable, it's okay to ask somebody else to step in and do the job for you. You have to have a good level of fear versus respect for what you're working with. If one gets out of balance, then you need to step back and let somebody who's more qualified get in there. My advice to safety directors and any supervisor really, go to the training. You need to know exactly what dangers are present for what your people are working with so you can get them the proper gear, you can give them the proper training. Because how are you supposed to lecture them on something if you don't know the information yourself? Because they're not going to listen to you. A lot of old school electricians train people that old way, like we don't need this, it's just going to be 5 seconds. But that 5 seconds can change your life. It changed my life, and it could mean the difference between going home to your kids and family and not making it out the next day. They said I was 5 minutes away from losing my life. 5 minutes either way, it could have went bad.
And how was that?
It was rough.